Hey everybody, you're now listening to Sanity at the Movies, Two Towers edition. Yay! Before we get going though, I do need to do today's Patron Choice Award of Awesomeness, the PCAA, and so I am going to do that right now. This of course is part of the show where I choose a patron who gives at the amount that I can do this and say how awesome they are. So, Jacqueline, you're awesome. You're beautiful. You're charming. You're witty. You're intelligent. It would basically, I would need Rajay's thesaurus, Rajay's 2, to express how amazing you are. But I don't have it, and so my vocabulary fails me. Jacqueline, just take my word for it. You're awesome. And that concludes the Patreon Choice of Awesomeness. Or whatever it was I called it. Patron Choice Awards of Awesomeness. Yeah, that's it.
Yay.
Nathan.
Jake.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Movie. Bad.
If you can call it a movie.
What would you call it?
A bad movie.
A bad movie.
Rats, you caught me. Cornered.
Oh boy. Folks.
I was disappointed.
By this movie?
Yeah, I thought it was gonna hold up much better.
Yeah, me too.
You guys gotta remember, the movies were my introduction to Lord of the Rings. I liked the movies.
So you've got some real nostalgia for this stuff.
Because of movies. And so, yeah, I've got nostalgia for it. When you think about when I think about Two Towers, I think, oh, yeah.
Hashtag Helm's Deep.
Helm's Deep, exactly. Like, yes, Helm's Deep is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what you think. And then you think, oh, yeah, and I'll forgive all that other crap.
Yeah, and then you get into it, and it's like, oh my goodness, what a mess.
A, there's a lot of other crap. B, Helm's Deep, I mean, it's fine, whatever, but...
It's like, what are we going to do with Frodo and Sam? Have them spin their circles and then have Faramir, grab them and take them all the way back to square one so their journey's meaningless?
Now, fun fact about Jake, he does call tires circles. He goes to the place and says, can you put some more circles on my car?
What did I say?
You just said they spin their circles.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. Second fun fact about Jake, he is 4 years old.
No, what I meant was that
they go in circles.
They go in circles.
Yeah.
I mean, all right. Man, that's twice you got me. You're racking up those points this time.
Ready to pounce.
No,
but you're absolutely right. This whole movie is about walking in circles and spinning wheels until the two things that they need to happen can happen.
What's the second one?
You got me. You got me back, because there's one thing that needs to happen, which is Helm's Deep.
That's it.
And
with Isengard, I guess Gandalf needs to. We need to get Gandalf back from the dead. Helm's Deep needs to happen.
And in order to do that, you need to introduce everybody that has anything to do with Helm's Deep. And okay, so let me say this. I thought I was going to like this movie better than I did, because I remember really liking it because the Helm's Deep stuff did just simply seem awesome. And boy, I guess we said this last time, but I have a lot of sympathy for all the problems that they ran into. The timeline,
a lot of it's timeline.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where you were going to.
Yeah, the timeline lines up in a weird way. If you're going to be intercutting between these stories, you have to decide where the climaxes are and how it's all going to play off against each other, and that creates some real problems because actually
you can't go to Shelob's lair.
Yeah.
And so what are you actually going to do with Sam and Frodo? Because for the timeline to work, they really have almost nothing to do, but besides tame Smeagol.
Well, and so okay, solution number one that you think of is compress the timeline. Who cares? Make them get to Shelob earlier. Problem with that is you're going to have a double climax. And so then the nerds say, okay, well, actually, Helm's Deep was just one chapter, so why don't you just make it smaller so it's not such a climax? And it's like, please.
Guys, come on.
Come on. It's Helm's Deep. everybody, like when I heard as a nerdy kid or nerdy whatever I was when they announced they were making these movies, it's like a couple things that I want to see: a Balrog and Helm's Deep. I mean, really, those are the two things that any boy is going to remember. And if he has to choose one, I mean, it is just the one. Like, Helm's Deep is the iconic scene from that book. As an adult, you read through it and you're like, okay, well, who cares? But for any boy who's ever had that story read to them or who has read it themselves as a preteen or young teenager, Helm's Deep is it, man. It's so cool. Orc heads are flying and it's like a medieval battle, and it's the closest Tolkien comes to just giving you some action.
Aragorn jumps outside of the gate to fend people off. All of those things are actually in the book, you know. Like,
yeah, there's nothing else that comes close in the book in terms of just giving you.
They forget about
action.
Gandalf, and they're gonna make their last ride as men into like all that stuff is just awesome. And then Gandalf shows up, and we have another catastrophe, and
maybe the best one. I mean.
Yeah.
After that, all the other catastrophes, arguably not the ring being destroyed, but you know, like the Battle of Pelennor Fields is just Tolkien doing at length and with really highfalutin, boring language what he already did perfectly at Helm's Deep. Helm's Deep is the coolest chapter in the book. Everybody remembers the name of the chapter, and they remember that it's the coolest chapter. I don't know, when I say everybody, I mean boys. Who knows why girls even read Lord of the Rings.
Eowyn, man.
Yeah, Eowyn, man. Yeah, well, we'll have occasion to talk about her. Well, I guess we'll be able to talk about her, the movie version of her, a little bit today. And boy, that will be like stabbing ourselves in the ears with pencils.
Yeah.
Unpleasant is what I'm trying to say metaphorically there. So, no, they couldn't do small Helm's Deep. They were contractually obliged the second they took this IP and decided to adapt it to do Helm's Deep,
a huge
justice.
Set piece.
It has to be big. It has to be the coolest thing we've ever seen. It has to push technology to its limits. It has to marshal thousands of extras. And
Helm's Deep is why Peter Jackson wanted to do Lord of the Rings in the first place, guys. That's the other thing you've got to really realize about this. Like, if you're a guy like Peter Jackson, the reason you take Lord of the Rings is because you're fully justified in creating the technology to do a really cool siege scene,
which is what he's obviously interested in. It's where his heart is in this movie. His heart is A, always with the men, as opposed to the hobbits and elves, and B, it's in the heroic action stuff. That's Peter Jackson. You know, he would have been perfect for Conan the Barbarian or something like that. He loves that kind of stuff. He could really care less about some of the other elements of Tolkien, which is fine. But
honestly, he doesn't care about the stuff Tolkien does best. He cares about the things that Tolkien often didn't spend a whole lot of time on.
The Tolkien just brushes past because Tolkien's like, and then another action scene happened, and you all know that, but what about this rock? It had moss on it. It was cool. It was an ancient rock.
Who knows how long it was there in this field?
Right.
Perhaps unseen hands moved it there in generations past. We shall never know.
Except for now Gandalf's explaining it. Isn't that interesting? At length, like a tour guide on like a bus in Hollywood or something.
Which actually makes you sympathetic to Jackson's trope of, yes, now we've come to Mos Eisley.
Yes, Gondor, city of king. You know, every time they get to the place, they announce it, which in Tolkien, they actually do. So you're not doing Helm's Deep. You're not making it small. You're not making it short. You nerds that suggest that that's even an idea don't understand
money, movies, people.
Storytelling. Like, who wants a small Helm's Deep? If you're going to do it, do it. I mean, the only real solution if you're going to do it small is to cut it out. I mean, another option would be contrive a structure that moves it to the very end, which is basically what they did, I guess. But
it sure feels contrived. And like, we're just working really hard to make it feel like there's enough movie and story here to justify this battle.
Well, but the point of this entire rant was to establish the fact that they did have all these problems. They did. Like, you have some real structural problems, and they're very hard to solve. And people who say, Fellowship is the best one. Fellowship was a relatively easy adaptation. You could just film that book, and basically they just cut out some parts from that book, and they filmed it, and it worked. They did some clever and interesting and some not so clever things. We talked about that last time. But Fellowship's a super easy adaptation compared to these other two books.
Yep.
mean, the fact is Tolkien also, he's not always interested in plot. He's not really interested in character. He's just interested in moments and scenes and lore and setting. And Tolkien's just like, he defies adaptation. So then the nerds say, well, just don't make a movie.
Okay, fine. Don't watch a movie.
Yeah, but
don't deny us.
They made one.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, can we talk about how you might do it? What I think that they probably should have done is actually taken us to Shelob and have the big fight with Shelob actually intercut with Helm's Deep. That's actually the way to structure it, so that you have two big climaxes for each story.
Well, then what you can do is you can have, if you see, there's a great way to set that up where it looks like Sam and Frodo are making it, and it looks like Aragorn and the army at Helm's Deep are getting defeated, and then we flip them at the same time, right? We see our friends over here celebrating, and then we see Sam mourning dead Frodo.
Mm-hmm.
That's being carried off by orcs. And, oh no. Over here, we think, yay, hope. Over there, we think, no.
Everything's
terrible. And that's where it really matters, because that's where the ring is. And
yeah, who cares if these guys... So that's one way to do it. I can understand why they didn't do that, because that is asking a lot of the audience to have two huge emotional climaxes. Like, you could see how they could detract from each other, having Sam's heroism against Shelob intercut with the catastrophe of Gandalf showing up. It's like, it's probably too much. You can imagine how a Star Wars movie, those endings, they always have three things going on at the ending. You could imagine how it could be done. Mm-hmm. But usually with Star Wars, the way that George Lucas did it in the good old days of the prequels and those last couple OT movies, one of the stories would be the emotional one that you cared about, and then the other story would be like the Gungans.
Semi-comic relief.
Yeah, it's like, here's the Duel of the Fates where everything's on the line, and then here's Jar Jar screwing around.
He's got a gun attached to his foot.
And then here's Anakin, not really in any real danger, just learning how to fly a spaceship and having fun and doing something for the kids.
Or shoot, here's Harrison Ford playing hijinks with these shield base operators.
Yeah, but really that it's an action scene as extended foreplay with Princess Leia. I mean, it's a relation. Right. It's the two of them enjoying each other's company and flirting with each other as much as anything.
While they save the day and kill bad guys.
Well, they save the day and kill bad guys because that's what one does. And then it's Lando in a fun dogfight type situation.
Yeah.
And sure, they all have their own dramatic moments and peaks and valleys.
But the real drama is always Luke and the Emperor, and it's the pace and tone is different for a reason.
And so you can imagine how, especially if you tried to do three, like if you tried to have Treebeard and his dudes busting up, the Rohirrim showing up to save the day, and Sam fighting Shelob. Okay, Treebeard we don't care that much about. That could be kind of a fun slapstick. That could be the pressure release one. But also, they get a lot of mileage in the movie as it is out of Treebeard busting up, being cool, and let's watch all the iron machinery stuff get washed away. Like, this is a big moment. So you're going to diminish that one so that you can make Shelob cooler. So these are the kind of choices that they had to make. And I can have sympathy for the fact that they were difficult to make and maybe impossible without really changing the story a lot, which wouldn't have made the nerds any happier.
Yeah.
Their solution is basically always, we are going to contrive a character reason to delay things until such time as the climaxes can happen. So it's going to be like Theoden's not happy with Aragorn, or not willing to listen to good counsel, or there's bickering there, there's problems. It's going to be the stupid, idiotic stuff with Faramir just randomly being a thug and then randomly deciding not to be a thug for absolutely no reason. We're going to get that kind of stuff through the rest of these two movies where characters, Frodo's going to send Sam away. And again, it's because they had a narrative problem. They needed to delay a climax. They needed to have Sam show back up for Shelob.
Yep.
And so we're going to have a character act out of character, be way meaner and stupider than they actually were in Tolkien, or than we thought that they were before this happened.
Yep.
That's just always their solution. And it's kind of dispiriting watching it in this movie because all the characters are dumb and they suck. Theoden doesn't seem like a great king. Faramir is a punk. And I mean, it's the reason people don't. What I actually think they should have done is they should have come up with more things like that stupid wolf attack. As dumb as that is, it's harmless, and it's within the spirit of other things that happened in Tolkien. You know, just like random plot mechanics would actually be better than making these characters behave in weird or off-putting ways in order to justify the plot not moving forward. It's like Die Hard. You have all those characters that don't know how to handle a terrorist attack on a building. You have all those mean cops that are putting down John McClane and not believing him. There's like a series of characters that only exist to disbelieve John McClane and to make stupid decisions.
So that McClane has to do more awesome things.
Right. And you can do that once. It kind of works in Die Hard, I guess, although I do get pretty tired of it. Die Hard, actually, in between all the awesome stuff that you remember where he's diving off buildings, there's a lot of, here's another stupid character making another stupid decision to justify the plot. You can occasionally do that, but I always think it's a pretty cheap trick to have a character behave more stupidly than they actually would in order to justify the plot.
Yeah, if you're going to do that, just create a really stupid character who is always in character and have him float all over the place like Jar Jar Binks or Chip McGregory.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You can actually set up a character that is set up from the beginning. Like, oh, that's definitely what he would inevitably do. He would screw things up here. But that takes some doing, because usually you don't want your characters to be stupider than your audience.
Yep.
If the audience is ready to believe your protagonist, then to create a bureaucratic jerk that won't believe them, it's just lazy writing. It's straw man creating. And this movie does a lot of that. And thanks for listening, everybody. Because
there's really not a lot.
I summed up everything that's wrong with this movie. I'm sorry, Jake. I should have let you talk more.
I didn't have anything more to say than that. I think I was just disappointed and had my nostalgia overwhelmed by the difficulty of even my kids. My kids loved Fellowship, and my kids hated this movie, which really surprised me. I was expecting to like it, and I was expecting them to like it. And I don't think they were keying off of me as I was watching it. I think a lot of it was just like...
It's kind of boring. It takes a long time to get to the action scenes and stuff.
Yeah, and then, at the end of the movie, one of my kids was just like, look, Dad, I don't want to watch the next one because everything they did was just way cooler in my imagination. And I don't like what they did with, he was really upset by what they did to Frodo. And the ways they made Frodo sort of nasty, and he's under the sway of the ring and almost has these like horror faces. They're coming,
Well, Junkie Frodo is obviously what Jackson's conceit is. I mean, I'm sure he thought of that explicitly. He's a drug addicted character, and that's what the aesthetic's going to be. That's how I want Elijah Wood to play it.
Yep.
And a little bit of that goes a long way.
Yep. And they give us more than a little bit of it.
Yeah, and it comes early. Like if Frodo's under the eye in Mordor acting like that, it makes sense. Like for the third movie and for the third book, if he's getting more and more deranged as they get closer to Mount Doom, that makes sense. But to have him already have succumbed this quickly is, I don't know, it just makes for an unlikable protagonist a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk through some of the elements of the movie. I think there's certain things that work really well that we just take for granted and aren't that delighted by now, but that, played really well the first 40 times we saw this movie, chiefly among them Gollum.
He works. He's fun. I don't want to say anything against him.
Sounds like you could say something against him if you...
No, I mean, I don't know. Gollum's one of the more challenging characters to read if you're reading out loud to your kids. It's a very distinctive performance, and it's good.
It actually surprised me in rereading the book that the clear schizophrenic distinction between Smeagol and Gollum is there in the book.
Yeah.
Pretty explicitly. I always thought that Jacksoned that up, just like he exaggerates everything. But actually, Sam does overhear Gollum having, Stinker and Slinker having a conversation, pretty much that conversation where Jackson starts to cut between
them,
the two Gollums. That's in the book.
Yep.
He just found a way to tell it visually
in a way that was kind of fun.
Yeah, I actually liked that.
Yeah.
The CGI doesn't quite hold up as well as it used to, but you can still lose yourself.
It was still
in
state of the art at the time.
What they do now that they didn't do then is they take a lot more care to make the grass depress as his feet, like all the environmental factors. I think they've gotten better at either just animating those in or doing what it takes to manipulate the environment such that when you drop the CGI character in, when he touches a branch, it bends. And there's a lot of stuff once you start to look for it where, Gollum's not actually impacting the environment around him. Unless it's a big, when he's fighting with them, he'll splash or he'll throw the blanket when he's fighting them. And that stuff's pretty seamless. But then I think about him at the very end when he's succumbing to the darkness and wandering around the woods by himself. He keeps grabbing branches and stuff, and the branches don't move or change. It's pretty seamless. I mean, you wouldn't once I say that and you go and look, then you're like, oh, this doesn't work. But before I said that,
didn't occur to me.
You can just enjoy it.
Thanks for ruining it, Nathan.
You're welcome. Another thing that Tolkien actually doesn't do any better than the movie. The movie seems a little hand-fisted, but then you read Tolkien and you're like, oh, well, they basically did it. Theoden's redemption scene. The movie makes it straight demon possession, like Gandalf's I will draw you out, Saruman, as somebody draws out a poison from a wound.
Yeah, and then we actually see Saruman go sprawling.
Yeah, which
in
is
his tower.
Dopey as heck. But you read Tolkien and it's not that much more psychologically sophisticated than that.
Yeah, it's not.
I had always assumed that this is actually a character moment, but Jackson turned it into a demon possession. Well, it's kind of a subtler demon possession in the book.
Yep.
What about Éowyn?
Don't like her.
I don't like her either. I don't really like her in Tolkien.
I don't like her, and I think I like her better in the movies than in Tolkien. And that. Well,
we just recorded our Milan episode where we talked about how Milan was a much more sympathetic feminist heroine because she had imperfections and she was striving to accomplish something, and she wasn't just always right and pious like bad 90s feminist icons in movies were. That's what they essentially do to movie Éowyn. They give her some relatable flaws and desires and kind of humanize her in a way that I guess makes her work. But I don't know. In both Tolkien and the movie, the fact that she falls in love with Aragorn is super lame.
Yep.
And the movie's going to give her that dumb sword scene.
Yeah, where she's practicing or whatever, fighting with Aragorn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Which all that dialogue, which I assumed was just like feminist Philippa Boyens and Peter Jackson, it's all from Tolkien. All the what do you wish, my lady? Not to be put in a cage.
That's Tolkien.
That's just straight Tolkien. Which is, we haven't actually recorded our bookending episode on that. It'll be interesting to talk about that. I don't like it in Tolkien, but you can't accuse Jackson and his crew of making it more feminist or anything like that, because
it's just the way it is.
Just the way it is.
By the way, can we just talk about Frodo's characterization again? Because not only is he under the sway of the ring, he actually attacks Sam.
Like holds a sword to his neck.
Apparently Frodo and Sam are at the Battle of Osgiliath and Nazgul show up, right? And Frodo's like going to take the ring to them, and Sam tries to fight him back, and then Frodo fights Sam and pulls a sword on him and is going to kill him.
I've been guilty of this, like in writing our story podcast, The Ville. You want your characters to be three-dimensional. You want to be willing to let your characters do the unlikable things that they would do. You want to follow the logic of the character all the way through. And so you let a character, or you write a character as doing something unlikable here and unlikable here and unlikable here. And then you read the thing and you're like, oh, we've lost sympathy with this character. This didn't work. Like I, as the author, always love all my characters because they're my babies. But anyone looking at this with any kind of freshness or objectivity is just going to be like, who is this person? I don't like this person. I think they make that mistake with Frodo and with Faramir specifically in this movie, where we are assuming a lot of goodwill because we as the creators have goodwill, because people bring goodwill from the books, because we remember having goodwill. Yep. And then we're writing a scene here where they do something unlikable and a scene there. And suddenly you put it all together and
it's ugly.
It's just unlikable. I remember George Lucas talking about Temple of Doom. That's his excuse. That's the party line on Temple of Doom is, we never set out to make a dark movie that wasn't for kids. We just did a dark thing here and did a dark thing there, and then we got done.
And it turned out it was pretty dark.
We had to create the PG-13. I can see how I've had that happen. I mean, in the cases where it's happened to us, for the most part, I think we've said, oh, well, that draft didn't quite work. Let's fix that and write another draft.
We also haven't released an episode in almost a year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is the other thing. You do, when you watch the behind the scenes things about these movies, you realize they were making them on the ground. Yeah. They were figuring out what was working. You know, they had fellowship, they put it together, and then they would have reshoots and bring people back. You know, we're still filming stuff, like filming new material. Like we did one big shoot, and then we released Fellowship of the Ring, and then we start to piece together Two Towers, and we say, okay, we need to bring people back. We need to do this. We need to do that. We need to redo that. People don't understand the politics here, so we're going to dump some exposition. Like they're trying to just make this massive undertaking work. Mm-hmm. When you look at it from that perspective, you do again have some sympathy. Like there's a scene, I think it's just in the extended edition, which I watched the extended. I think you watched the regular Two Towers.
I did, yeah.
Which lucky you.
Cool. Yeah.
So there's a scene where they just show a map. Faramir's like, "Come here, Mr. Lieutenant guy. Let me show you. Now, there's a tower here, and that's not the other tower, but it's one of the two towers. They're not, and this tower is related to this tower this way." And it's like completely, you can tell they filmed it just like, oh shoot, people don't even know
which two towers we're talking about.
What two towers are we talking about? And plus 9/11 just happened last year as we're releasing this. So should we rename it? I guess not, but let's explain these two towers. But I think in the regular cut, there's that scene where Galadriel communicates with Agent Smith.
Yes.
And she's just like, now let's not forget that Saruman's against us, but he's teaming up with Sauron, and there's armies coming from these two sides, and if the elves don't help, then
this whole quest stands on the edge of a knife. It kind of gets repeated again.
There's a number of places where you can tell they got self-conscious about the fact that, oh, people that haven't read the books aren't going to understand the politics. Like, how do the Rohirrim interact with Gondor? Like, what is this? And they were right, by the way. If you don't have those dumb asinine scenes where people explain things that other people already would know, it would be...
I don't remember feeling lost, and I don't remember resenting the exposition dumps first time through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it more or less worked for me or on me or both.
I mean, the nice thing about something like this is at the end of the day, those are the good guys, and they're good because they look like humans and they're handsome and beautiful. Those are the bad guys. They got teeth and claws and monsters, monster eyes, and they want to kill the good guys. I hope that they don't do that.
Yep.
I hope the good guys kill them. So you can actually miss a lot of the nuance, and it's fine.
So we look back on this movie, and we're pretty critical of it. But at the time, audiences and critics alike praised this movie. It was 95% certified fresh, and it had a 95% audience score.
Well, the ability to generate masses of humanoid creatures in a big battle scene felt so new and so fresh, and it's been done so many times since then. I mean, we hadn't seen anything on this epic scale since the 1950s big Bible epics like Ben-Hur, where they or the Ten Commandments, where they literally spent millions of dollars and got thousands of people. Like a Cecil B. DeMille movie, they're just going to build Egypt. They're going to hire thousands of people to play the...
Well, the closest thing we've actually got is, "Sire, there's a stampede in the gorge."
Yeah, exactly.
Or what we just talked about, or what we're about to talk about, I'm not sure which, the snow battle scene in Mulan.
Yeah, which is animated.
Animation's been the closest thing to give us this kind of spectacle.
Right. When you think about what the spectacle of the earlier 90s...
Independence Day.
Yeah, you can have some creepy crawly monsters or some mechanical things. But if you think about the last big battle epic that was really popular was Braveheart. And that movie's cool and it's got some spectacle, but it's also like they hired a couple hundred Marines to dress up like Scotsmen and do the battle scene. And it's about as well done as anything like that could have been done, but it's nothing close to on the scale of what Peter Jackson was able to do in this movie. Yeah. And so it is true that 20 years hence, it does not feel revolutionary at all. We've just seen a million examples of this kind of thing. Every epic movie, every Avengers movie, this kind of spectacle is just routine now.
Well, yeah. Avengers has basically made it cliche in and of itself.
Avengers is going to end with, there's the glowy thing that we've got to stop from glowing. There's thousands of enemy troops, CGI beasties that have massed and are charging at us, and we've got to fight them. And you'd never seen anything like that before Two Towers specifically. Fellowship of the Ring doesn't actually have anything like that. So the battles have held deep. It was amazing. I mean, now I watched it and I'm like, oh, I wish it could be a little darker. I wish we could actually see less. Like, this is so well lit and obvious, and there's such a more exciting version of this that you could do if you were trying. But that's completely unfair and uncharitable, because what they were doing then was absolutely state of the art. And guess what? They didn't want to dial down the lighting because they wanted people to be able to see this awesome stuff that they had created.
Okay, time to do some Lord of the Rings critic trivia.
All right.
So, of the three movies, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King, give me their critics' scores on Rotten Tomatoes in order from best to worst.
All right. I'm going to go with the non-intuitive answer and hope that that's correct. I'm going to hope it's a trick question, actually. Obviously, the intuitive answer, I think, the conventional wisdom among fandom would probably be Fellowship of the Ring is the best, Return of the King is the second best, Two Towers is far the worst. And, if you were going to go off of that, you'd put Fellowship of the Ring in the mid-90s, you'd put Return of the King maybe in the mid to low 90s, and then you'd say that Two Towers was like 89% or something like that. But I've
already revealed that Two Towers is 95.
Right. And I still think Two Towers might be no. All right. Here's my final answer.
Okay.
I seem to remember at the time that Return of the King was absolutely acclaimed. People went gaga for it. I remember one guy, just like Kenneth Turan, famously grumpy Los Angeles Times film critic, gave a bad review to Titanic, and James Cameron took out a full-page ad in Variety to lambaste him because James Cameron couldn't handle
criticism.
The one person that criticized his movie while he was the king of the world and had the most successful movie ever made, and it was critically acclaimed, even though that screenplay is garbage. He couldn't handle that one person didn't like it. I seem to remember Return of the King being similar. There was one guy, one contrarian guy, one or two that didn't like it. And other than that, it was like, for a while, it was actually 100%. So I'm going to say it's actually, unless people have added reviews over time, I'm going to say it's at 99 or 98%.
Okay.
I'm going to say Two Towers comes in second at 95, and I'm going to say Fellowship of the Ring. People weren't aware that a modern classic was being made. Critical mass hadn't quite snowballed. So people that were kind of grumpy and just didn't like fantasy could still just be like, I don't like this that much because it's not the kind of thing I'd like, instead of being browbeaten into liking it. So I'm going to say it's actually low 90s.
Pick a number.
Let's say 91.
Okay. So the correct answer is Two Towers wins at 95. Return of the King comes in second at 93. And Fellowship gets a 91. So you are almost right.
I swapped Return of the King and Two Towers.
Yep. But the audience scores tell an interesting story.
I'm going to say Fellowship of the Ring, far and away the winner.
Ties with Two Towers at 95%.
And then Return of the King is
86.
86. Interesting.
Audience not a fan of Return of the King.
I mean, I think the audience still liked it, but
they probably, holy cow. The numbers. Okay, so let me give you the number of critic reviews and the number of audience reviews. Something is going on with Return of the King that I don't quite understand. Maybe you can make sense of it for me. 231 critic reviews of Lord of the Rings, 91%. 253 of Two Towers, 95%. And 273 of Return of the King, 93%. So a jump in 20 reviews each year, something like that, or each movie. Audience score for Fellowship, 95%, 1.36 million audience reviews. Audience score for Two Towers, 95%, 1.34 million reviews. Audience score for Return of the King, 86%, 34.7 million reviews.
And what was Two Towers?
1 point.
So the reviews jumped astronomically.
30 times.
My guess...
Some kind of campaign or some kind of...
Yeah, it's exactly like how the Snyder fans lambast critics who don't like the Snyder movies, or what's the last big example that we've had? People campaign, the fans saying, let's get Robert Downey Jr. an Oscar for his last time as Tony Stark. I think it was one of those.
That kind of thing. Or Rian Johnson.
For
The Last Jedi.
For Last Jedi. Yeah, I think it's exactly that kind of thing where I think, you have to remember the internet cut its teeth. Nerd culture, internet, like the whole culture of nerds reviewing movies and YouTube reviews and all that stuff.
How old is Rotten Tomatoes?
Rotten Tomatoes that's a fantastic question.
Founded in 1990, launched in 1998.
Yeah, the year of Mulan.
So it's only 3 years old at Fellowship. It's 5 years old at Return.
Yep. And at Cool News, which kind of launched the rise of the nerd revolution, where nerds actually had some clout and some say, 96. So arguably the first big nerd property where the nerds were really in conversation with the filmmakers, and the filmmakers were saying, we're nerds, and here's a video about how, and here's tons of special features about how we're just like you, and, oh, you don't want Arwen in the movie? Okay, we'll take her out. The first time where the nerds really felt empowered was, in fact, Lord of the Rings. And that's a really important thing to remember about these movies. These movies were a game changer in terms of the way that studios interacted with their fan base. You don't have Sony bringing back Tom Holland's Spider-Man and giving him to Marvel. You don't have film geeks wielding as much power as they do. You don't have J.J. Abrams changing the trajectory of what Rian Johnson did. You don't have the Snyder Cut actually becoming a thing without Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is when, it's not the first time that nerds had opinions, obviously, but it is the first time that they had
their opinion carried enough weight to actually impact anything.
And the studios realized it's not that we
turn this into a promotional machine, actually.
Yeah, exactly. What we can do is
monetize this. Yeah. If we pay these guys, or if we incentivize these guys, if we give them some of these, nerd websites, we give them press cred, and we give them behind the scenes, and we give them access, we give them whatever, and lean into some of this, we can really galvanize. We could create fan events. We can let them create the fan events for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's really pretty crafty and pretty bad. For a minute there, it felt beautiful. I remember it. I was part of it. I wasn't like an important person, but I remember watching it, and at Cool News, these websites, it felt like, oh, we can collectively all be a part of this, and you don't have to work for a newspaper to review.
The power of the internet has allowed geeks from across the country to gain critical mass and actually have a voice and be able to.
Yeah, and that did feel true, and I don't know, maybe it still is, but what's also happened is exactly what you said, which is they realize, oh, we can just issue press credentials to these people. We can invite them to our junkets. We can fly Harry Knowles, who started in at Cool News, to New Zealand to hang out with Peter Jackson. And suddenly we have a ready-made PR machine of nerds that are just happy to be there and just happy to be hanging with big celebrities and hanging with directors.
If we butter it up the right way, they'll defend us, when we have to make tough decisions, or when we have to make money decisions. If they feel like they're part of it and have ownership of it, they'll have our back, and they'll still go put butts in seats.
Yeah.
We'll get the best of both worlds this way.
And I think that the studios basically have, a lot of people still, you get nerds being brats and demanding release the other version of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, that never existed, or
really Snyder's the only person that DC they've been able to mess with.
Yeah.
But DC's made it possible by really screwing it up. Warner Brothers has been terrible.
Yeah, DC is everything that's bad about this system. DC is, we as a studio really believe in Zack Snyder, and then we're going to get cold feet, and we're not going to let Zack Snyder be Zack Snyder. And the proof is in the pudding. The director's cut of Batman versus Superman is not great, but it is a cohesive,
It actually
interesting
makes sense.
movie. It's a Zack Snyder movie, and if you don't like Zack Snyder, then you're not going to like it. And I don't really like Zack Snyder, and I don't really like it, but it works. It's a full movie. Whereas the cut where they got cold feet because the internet decided it didn't like Zack Snyder doing this property is lame, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't have the courage of its misguided convictions.
Yep.
I don't know. It's been a mixed blessing at best, but Peter Jackson is kind of responsible for it. He's one of the people who saw the value. He's always seen the value with all those special features on the DVDs. Like, Peter Jackson's a very accessible presence in a way that the only person that's really a precursor to that is Steven Spielberg, who's always been a name brand let me backtrack. Alfred Hitchcock was actually the first person who figured out how to become a brand and a personality and a face, like, here I am. And then Walt Disney obviously mastered it, but those guys were few and far between. Now everybody's expected to be that. If you're going to play the game, then that's one of the rules. J.J. Abrams has to be like available. Zack Snyder,
Kevin Feige,
Jon Favreau, and Dave Filoni. They're going to make a little show about how great it is working with each other and how much they love the fans and put it on Disney Plus. And that's really all that show is. Aren't we accessible? Aren't we cool? Isn't it fun?
We're nerds just like you who just lucked into a dream job, and we get to make this stuff. And
Filoni actually is, which is what makes that little
so
puff piece kind of charming, actually, and fun. Maybe Favreau is too. I tend to like Jon Favreau.
I just think he's a savvy man, but I really like him.
He knows how to play the game well.
He knows how to play the game well, and he's smart about people and using people and in ways that are smart. And at the end of the day, he feels, and this doesn't sound really dumb, but I think I've probably said it or alluded to it in enough places that in a lot of ways, he really is the spiritual successor in my mind of George Lucas, who actually doesn't seem to care all that much about his stories.
No. Well, and I'd say they're both the spiritual not successors, but what's the opposite? They both come out of Walt Disney, who I think was like that too. He's more, actually, at the end of the day, he was an entrepreneur. That's what he enjoyed, was pushing the technology and figuring out what the next big thing was.
In fact, that seems like Favreau's just always angling for a way to play with other people's money to develop cool new technology and get ahead of the game and change the game. Like, that's the kind of thing that he really likes doing. And he did it with The Jungle Book, and he did it with The Lion King, and he's doing it with The Mandalorian. That's cool and fun, and he's smarter about it than George Lucas because he's playing with house money, and he is attaching the right people to his projects to help make sure that they succeed and are lovable, even though I think both Jungle Book and Lion King are two flops as far as I'm concerned. They made money and people loved the Jungle Book, and the Lion King was never not going to make money. So.
Right. The interesting thing is, in today's world, with nerd ascendancy and with
Iron Man was the same thing for him, by the way.
Yeah. With relatability being key, someone like Favreau is the person who's actually going to get the keys to the kingdom, whereas the generation before, it'd be some nerd like George Lucas, who obviously has no people skills and seems like an introvert. If he's not actually, he certainly acts like somebody who's on some kind of like the Asperger's spectrum or something like that. Those were the guys, nerdy little Jewish guys were the guys that pushed it forward before. Now it's got to be somebody who can actually kind of interact and have a style and a brand. And that's how you get somebody like Zack Snyder, who doesn't seem like a very talented filmmaker, but if you watch him, he and his wife, Deborah, are really good talkers, really good BSers. He puts on a good bro act.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bro act, right? Like, if you're the kind of guy that is just like, I'm going to wear my trucker hat and smoke cigarettes and maybe have a couple of tats and watch MMA fights, and that's all Zack Snyder wants you to think he is. I'm going to work out on set with my actors because I'm into that thing, because that's kind of cool.
And Peter Jackson kind of paved the way. Hey, look, I'm making a Hobbit movie. I'm just like a Hobbit. Actually, I'm just like you. I'm fat, not really that talented. I'd sit and drink tea and eat my potato chips, and I just got lucky, and I'm just happy to be here.
Living the dream, baby.
Living the dream. and I'm quirky and fun, and I like horror movies, and I can't come out of nerd culture, and
I'm stuck here now, thanks.
yeah, I hate you all. Here. Here's some crappy Hobbit movies. Go away.
The Lord of the Rings made me a lot of money, and it also fully determined my career path. So yeah, here's some Hobbit movies.
And it's also, start around this time. I don't know. I find this subject interesting. Sorry, folks, if you don't. But around this time, just the whole culture of the way that stars sold themselves changed. Stars used to be aloof. They used to be the gods that walked among us or that didn't walk among us. Jack Nicholson is only going to do an interview every 10 years. You don't really know what he's like. You see him at a ball game or something like that. It'll cut to Jack Nicholson, or he'll be sitting there at the Oscars wearing his sunglasses.
Sunglasses at a ball game, sunglasses, and maybe even a ball cap.
Right. And it's the same thing for Gene Hackman, for Al Pacino, for De Niro, for all these guys. But that's not how the Chris Pratts and Dwayne Johnsons and Will Smiths.
Well, and then you have the guys that got caught in the middle of it, either won it or made serious missteps, right? Like Tom Cruise was pretty aloof, but then he realized he had to change. And so he jumped on Oprah's couch. But there was this thing called YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused him some problems.
Right. And that's one of the first viral videos. YouTube just hit at the exact right time. Everybody, the culture.
For Tom Cruise to get screwed by trying to make that transition. And then he retreated back into aloofness.
But he figured out how to brand his aloofness in a way. Like now he's the guy that does his own stunts, and he's the man that'll never age, and he's the nostalgia machine. Like he's found a way to make it play.
Yep.
The guy that really moved from one to the other is Robert Downey Jr. I think he managed to turn himself into a family-friendly brand at exactly the right time, and was his people or him or whoever. He was very savvy about how he stepped from. Well, and I think we both read that interview that came out around the time of Iron Man 1, where Robert Downey Jr., who's always pretty transparent with interviews, just says, like, I am changing my brand right now. I used to be a bad boy, and now I need to be a family man. So there are things that I'm not going to do anymore.
Yep.
And some of it feels moral. Some of it also just feels smart.
Savvy.
Whatever you want to say.
I mean, yeah, some of it feels like, hey, I have kids. Also, I nearly ruined my life with drugs and whatever else. And some of it is just like, also, the world doesn't look too kindly on grown men that don't grow up.
Right. I've aged out. Like I'm about to turn. I'm around 40 now. I can't keep doing the bad boy. I'm not the sexy young
guy, bad boy anymore. I can't be that. And I realize that. Marvel's my ticket.
So smart.
Yep.
Now you see, compare him to somebody like Chris Evans, who, because of the system that he operates in, has to do the relatability thing. Like his PR machine is trying to make him relatable. This guy, obviously, he would love to be, just reading between the lines here, folks, but indulge me. I think Chris Evans would love to live in the 1970s environment where he's hanging out with Pacino and De Niro and all these guys, and they don't have to give a crap about
what anybody thinks.
They don't give interviews. They don't act like they're happy. They don't sign autographs. They don't do little Instagram videos where they're being all relatable and showing you their workout routine no, they just show up and do their thing. They're artists. What you
get then with Chris Evans is, well, okay, since I have to do this, I guess I'll be a jerk and be a brat and be political.
Right. Somebody like Emma Watson or Harry Potter just did it the other day.
Daniel Radcliffe.
When he reacted to J.K. Rowling's thing.
Yeah. So did Cho Chen or...
yeah.
Whatever her name is.
That's what that's how a lot of them cope is as long as I'm stuck with having to stay in the public eye and portray a certain kind of person, even when I'm not making a movie, I'll bend it to my pet cause or to my politics.
Yeah.
And put it to work for me. Which I suppose I don't usually agree with their causes, but I have some sympathy for them
doing it that way.
Figuring out something to do with it, because it would be difficult to be stuck in that position. On the other hand, you're getting paid millions of dollars to hang around and play pretend. So suck it up and give us what we want.
A lot of the guys that are just resigned to making fun movies tend to be, in my view, the best at this sort of thing. I think Dwayne Johnson is one of the best at this, and he just makes dumb fun movies. Chris Hemsworth is pretty good at it, and he just plays a dumb, fun, comedic bro most of the time nowadays. Chris Evans is terrible at it, and he's really trying to be something now,
He's important.
Yeah. Chris Pratt, not very good at it because he's stuck between being having a couple of goofy, dopey comedy shticks, but also he's turned into a buff action star, and he just can't seem to strike a balance that makes any real sense.
Yeah, well, I also think he
also ruined his marriage.
Well, yeah, I think that's really one of the there's two things. Number one, he's stuck between being an action star and being a goofy, lovable, relatable guy, and those things really don't work that well together. Number two, he divorced the wife of his youth when she got too old, and I mean, I'm sorry,
nobody's got a lot of sympathy for that.
Yeah, you can't be a relatable Christian everyman, which is what he tries to portray himself as, and divorce your wife. You can't do it. Unless you could
upgrade to Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter.
Is that what he did?
Yeah,
I haven't even paid attention.
What he did.
Yeah, that's lame. Pratt and Anna Faris were a fun, goofy, quirky Hollywood power couple. It was good branding for them.
Yep.
If nothing else, they should have figured out a way to make it work just for branding purposes. That's what I'm worried about here on this Christian podcast is branding.
You know who can be aloof and make it work?
Who's that?
Keanu Reeves.
Well, Keanu Reeves is just an idiot savant.
Or
maybe he's a savant.
He's
I don't know.
Chosen one, man.
He is just the one. Yeah.
He's the one.
Keanu Reeves just always feels like a real Zen master. Like he loves you and he doesn't have a lot to say. Like Keanu Reeves has managed
He also has no idea how he got to be where he is, but he just keeps doing the things that come to him.
Yeah. And he's just slightly dazed by his success. I think of all of them, Keanu Reeves is the one that, whether that's savvy branding or just who he is, I buy it and I love it.
I buy that it's just who he is. He's the most buyable, easiest to buy for me. It's just like, there's a guy who kind of really sucks, but keeps showing up to work and somehow has the right charisma or charm or doofusness that he's fun to watch on screen.
He's also just really smart about the projects that he picks. Like, I'm not going to be that great in it. It's not really an interesting part for me, but this project, John Wick, The Matrix, Bill and Ted, Speed, all these classic Keanu things.
Even the movies that he tends to pick cameos for.
Yeah, that Netflix
seem to go well for him, right? He seems to pick the right one or the thing that really plays well.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't play himself out too much. I hope
That's what the next year could feel like. We have Matrix, Bill and Ted, and another John Wick movie all coming in the next year, and maybe one other thing. And Marvel's item for something.
Yeah.
I forget what.
Well, it felt like a little bit much with Toy Story 4 and John Wick 3 and the Netflix cameo. I think those all hit the same year, and that was a little bit much Reeves. He needs to be...
Yeah.
Part of his charm is that he's kind of aloof, and he just shows up every 5 years or 10 years and does something crazy and fun. And that is why The Two Towers... is a cinematic masterpiece. You can tell how excited we were to talk about this movie. Listen, it was a bummer watching it. I think me and my wife stretched it over like 3 nights or something like that. It just wasn't fun. That middle section really drags when Aragorn gets swept over the cliff. And it's like, oh no, I sure hope Aragorn, the king in the next movie, survives to make it to become king in the next movie. Even if you haven't read the books, like, Aragorn didn't die there. There's no way. Storytelling logic dictates we don't kill Aragorn here. We're not doing like a audience fake out psycho thing where we're killing. Yeah, it's lame. What do you think about Treebeard?
Good job.
I don't like him that much.
I don't like Treebeard to begin with, so...
No, I don't like Treebeard that much either, but it also feels like Peter Jackson doesn't like Treebeard and thinks he's boring and stupid, and that's kind of a bad look for the movie. Here's the boring and stupid character doing boring and stupid things. Also, it's another convoluted plot thing that doesn't make sense, where the Ents sit around and they decide we're not going to attack Isengard. And then Treebeard sees Isengard and he's like, all right, guys, let's attack. And they're all just ready to do it.
What they see is, be fair, what they see is a big empty space between them and Isengard where they expected to see a wood full of trees that they knew and loved and whatever.
These guys are such morons that they didn't do a little research and development before they made their first plan. Like, this is the first that they actually know how bad it is at Isengard. A little bird couldn't have told them, literally. A little birdie couldn't fly over and tell Treebird, like, hey, things are bad at Isengard. It doesn't make any sense, Jake. It angers me. You know what else angers me? Wormtongue being painted in like white goth makeup and talking like this the whole like, who is this guy? How did he ever worm his way into the castle? This guy is not a good spy. If you look evil and you have long, dirty fingernails and greasy rock star hair, you're not a good spy for the bad guys.
Yep.
He should look fairer and talk fouler, or whatever Frodo says.
Yeah. Breaking news.
Yeah.
While we're recording this, one of the top trending things on Twitter right now is Black Panther 2.
Ooh.
Can you guess why it's trending? There is a rumor about a casting decision.
Did they let somebody go or hire somebody?
Bringing somebody in, potentially for a 3-picture deal. She would begin by joining the cast of Black Panther 2.
So it's a famous, I assume,
Is this famous black
African American actress?
Let's pick the most.
Whoopi Goldberg.
But update it from the 90s to the 2000s.
I thought you were going to say pick the oldest, most out-of-date reference. So I did. Okay, so it's a black actress known for drama or comedy?
No.
Michelle Obama.
That's not a bad pick.
Is it a person known for acting?
Not primarily.
Oprah, of course.
I knew that would be the choice.
All right, give me another hint.
Well, this person is going to be playing, probably, it would appear, an action hero.
Venus Williams or Serena?
Nope.
Sports figure?
Nope.
Entertainer?
Yes.
Talk show kind of thing?
Nope.
Not sports, not talk. TV?
Nope.
Movies?
Not primarily. No.
Politics?
Nope.
Author?
Leaving out a big category here. Nope.
Video games?
Nope. Where are we located currently?
Podcaster?
No, but we are in a
Studio?
which is designed primarily for
Recording things?
specifically,
Audio?
and most specifically,
Podcasts?
it wasn't designed.
Oh,
with
it's Beyonce.
Yes. Good job.
Wow, that took way too long.
Wow.
Can she act?
I don't know. People are freaked out. People are saying storm.
I can't say I care for that at all.
That's what they're saying. Some people are disputing it or talking about how that can't be true because that would be an obviously dumb move. And so whatever the rumors are, maybe it's really just about doing the soundtrack or something. But that's not what the most everything is like 3-film deal, beginning Black Panther 2, using Black Panther 2 to launch her as a character.
Full confession. I don't like Beyonce.
Yeah.
To me, when I think about Beyonce, I think about somebody who's about 25 years older than...
They did a great job of casting plenty of talented, charismatic, beautiful black people in Black Panther.
Yeah, I know, but I just don't think of Beyonce as being talented or charismatic at this point.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like you can do that without pulling in. It almost feels like in some ways a betrayal because we
didn't cast for name marquee value. We cast for talent,
and then we used the platform of Marvel to promote all of this talent, right? Like into the spotlight. Like that was that was one of the best things about Black Panther 2. Yeah,
it feels like a real indie cast. Actually.
Yeah, of very talented people whose careers are going to be pushed forward by it. And now Beyonce feels like really lazy casting.
Yeah, Beyonce feels like the equivalent of Forrest Whitaker in the first movie. Like, we just have this person here because people have heard of him.
Right.
Yeah, don't care for it. Don't care for Beyonce. Think she should, given that she's in her 40s, she should put on some clothes. That's my conservative old man ranting on a porch rant about Beyonce. Find her just kind of off-putting, honestly.
Yeah. How old is she's 38?
Is she 38? Okay. I honestly assumed she was like 45 or something like that. But still, 38 is too old to regularly have me scroll past you on Netflix, Beyonce, in the state of dress that I regularly scroll past you on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Really, any age is too old, but you know what I mean? There's something particularly undignified about Beyonce doing what she does. Time to admit that you're middle-aged. That's what I think about Beyonce.
Well, maybe it's just a dumb rumor and it's taking over Twitter for no apparent reason. So we can hope for that. Marvel's not been dumb about these things.
No, I mean, I think
they're going to be especially careful about Black Panther 2, especially given the current climate. So
yeah, they have the opportunity to either mess it up or knock it out of the park. Those are really the two things they can do with Black Panther 2.
Well, I guess we should stop pretending to talk about Two Towers and call it a day.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other value, Two Towers nutrition we can give to people. Anything else to say?
I don't think so.
I don't know. If I keep talking about things, I'll just keep reiterating that it just didn't work for me. Like, I remember liking Theoden and really feeling for his whole journey. He didn't really work for me. He just felt erratic and like he was mad at Aragorn for no reason. Kind of a jerk. Aemir I like that guy when he plays McCoy in the Star Trek movies, but I like that guy in almost anything, but he's kind of a zero as Aemir. Just thinking through stuff with Aragorn and Arwen is really boring and shoehorned. I guess the nerds have been saying that now for 20 years, but in this particular case, I agree with them. Shield surfing. We haven't talked about shield surfing, Jake.
Oh, okay.
We can't do a whole podcast on Two Towers without talking about the iconic scene from all of cinema.
He surfs the shield down some stairs. It's really cool. He has to do it from now on every time he's on screen.
Well, I'm just trying to, let's think. You've got Gene Kelly singing in the rain.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Indiana Jones running from that boulder.
Yep.
You've got...
Play It, Sam.
Yeah, Play It, Sam. What's number 4? Because obviously number 5 is Legolas shield surfing. Number 4 is probably like Harold Lloyd hanging from that clock, or Charlie Chaplin skating at City Lights, or maybe Citizen Kane walking past all those mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
These are the iconic moments of cinema.
Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah.
Smoking her cigarette.
Yeah, and her little cigarette holder.
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe.
The skirt
thing.
Flying. Yeah. Yep. Those would be the moments. I think we named all of them.
John Wayne tipping his hat back.
Or maybe standing in that doorway.
And the Searchers.
The Searchers, yeah. Mickey Mouse on Steamboat Willie whistling as that steamboat goes down the river.
All slightly beneath Legolas shield surfing.
All garbage is what I wanted to say. Like, those movies suck.
Relatively speaking.
When Legolas jumped on that shield, it was like, oh, okay, now I understand what cinema was created for.
All of cinema had been leading to this point, and nothing will be the same after this, and everything will be standing in this moment's shadow. Like, from now on.
It sucks that I will never have the joy and ecstasy that I feel watching this again. Like, this has kind of actually ruined movies for me because they've gotten as good as
possible. Yeah.
Like, it's not going to be better than this.
You can try to top it by having Legolas shield surf again, or surf
elephant
in a different
surf.
way. Elephant surf.
You can bring him back. You can bring him back in The Hobbit just so that he can spider surf, orc surf, barrel surf, stone surf, winged bat creature surf.
But even then, I don't know that it'll live up to the original surfing.
You know, the only thing that he's never surfed is a surfboard. Isn't that interesting?
That's interesting. Somebody should, Jackson.
Let's get the team back together.
Let's do it. You got a mandate from the people, man. We need Surfing Hobbiton.
Or maybe just trace the story of...
Surfing Havens Gray.
Surfing Havens Gray.
Come on, that was a good pull.
That was a good pull. Yeah, trace the story of the human, like the random soldier at Helm's Deep who watches him and thinks, I could do something like this. And then this guy building the first surfboard.
And all of that inevitably leading to the Beach Boys.
Yep. From Legolas to the Beach Boys.
Make it happen.
Well, just like you can't top that moment in cinema, you really can't top this moment in podcasting.
That's true. So might as well be done. With all podcasts ever.
Yeah. Warhorn Media is canceled. Thank you, Legolas. I'm not even going to give the credits. If I was, I would say that the show was produced by me, executive produced by you and me. But I don't think I'll say any of that.
No.
Let's just say the two words that mean everything, that changed everything. Shield surfing.
So it begins.